Mary Perrott from Whānau Āwhina Plunket, and tonight we have the wonderful Barbara Backshall back with us again. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara's got over 40 years' experience in early childhood education, and she's the professional practice leader for BestStart Educare. Last time Barbara was on, she talked to Katrina about birth to 18 months, and tonight we're going to be talking about our lovely toddlers, which is always an exciting stage of development, isn't it, Barbara?
It sure is. There's a
Yeah,
lot happening. There's a lot happening.
yeah,
Yeah. So we're kind of looking, I guess, Mary, at about 18 months, 15 to 18 months to about
yes,
2.5, 3. We tend
yeah,
to, in education, we tend to think about a toddler as being where a young person's at and what they can do. So it's that movement from being an infant and being almost totally dependent on an adult to moving
yes,
into some beginnings of independence. So some of
sure.
those milestones are really around the crawling to walking. But it certainly is a time of amazing development. And
Yeah,
those
sure
of
is.
you that have toddlers will really know about that. It's really that time when the physical ability takes off. So walking starts to happen and balance starts to happen. A phenomenal growth in language development.
Absolutely, yes, yeah,
But it's probably renowned for the emotion intensity of feelings that toddlers go through as they come to experience frustration and joy and other emotions all for the first time, and the frustration of maybe not being able to communicate just accentuates um, those kind of what we've often called tantrums um,
yes,
in
yeah.
this period of time.
It's often when you say the word toddler, you can see a look on someone's face,
Yeah.
can't you? And they understand that that is a time where you will see a lot of those more emotional states that they go through. And it's also a great time of learning as a new parent, too, isn't it? As they transition from being that infant and maybe in a more contained space to when they're taking off. So you learn pretty quickly about where they get to and what can go wrong, don't you?
You sure do. Yeah,
Yeah.
you sure do. Yeah.
So, what would be some of the other physical development that we would see with the toddlers? What sort of things are they moving on to now?
Like I talked about a few seconds ago, it's around that walking. It's around learning about balance and control of their own bodies, learning about their fine motor skills, starting to experiment with how they can pick up finer things, and using their bodies in different ways because they've been crawling or rolling or sitting. They haven't had the same ability to explore, and it's an explosion of curiosity, both about their own bodies and how it moves, but also about what they encounter. Really, yeah.
Absolutely. And lots of noise comes with that, doesn't it? So
Oh,
the pre-literate stage of noise and sound and maybe a frustrated sound now and again, but also lots of mimicking going on, isn't there, in
Oh, a
that
lot of
language?
mimicking. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's how toddlers learn their language really is through practicing how to make sounds with their mouths so that it's coming out in all sorts of gabbly ways. And we've often gooed over um, babbling that a toddler might bring, but they need to be allowed to do that so that they feel confident to keep practicing, really practicing at
absolutely.
making sounds and talking. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really one of those things that we often talk to our students about how important it is to engage. So, we often talk at children, but all of that, get down at their level and listen because we're very good at talking over. It takes them a little while. Sometimes they get frustrated when they're talking, trying to get something across, don't they? So that, that patience as the adult in the situation is really important, isn't it?
It's absolutely crucial, and you're so right about the interaction and the research that's coming through in the last, 8 to 8 to 10 years around that brain development, that the interaction, the backwards and forwards, body language and beginning to talk actually causes neurons to spark in the brain and causes a brain to start developing. It's like the positive emotions also do that. So it's as you stop and listen and see what the communication is about and respond to that with words. The other thing I often say to people is we don't need to correct. What we need
Yes.
to do is just repeat the word correctly in a sentence till they start to pick it up. So they might be saying a word like banana, they might be saying nana, and then you say, oh yes, you want the banana. So that again, it's not anything that makes the child feel they're doing something wrong. It's
Yes.
about making the child want to have another go. So it's really
Absolutely.
important that we keep that language informal and encourage them to keep trying to talk to us. I always pretend when I'm in an early childhood centre visiting, I always pretend I can understand what they're saying.
Yes.
And that makes them want to try more. I just
Of
go, oh,
course.
that's great. Oh, how
Absolutely.
interesting. And they keep talking. Now,
Yeah.
as a parent, they just start to know what the unformed word, for want of a better way of explaining it, they start to know what those words are more so. And if you're a teacher in a centre and you're working with a child, often you begin to know what those words are. So then you'd just be repeating informally in a conversation the words they're trying to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that's often the way too, isn't it, with these little ones that the more you know them, the more you're interacting with them, you're picking up some of those things that maybe only someone very close to them would understand. But
Mm,
that's lovely too, isn't it? It's
mm,
kind of that reciprocal relationship that you have about spending that time to listen and then engaging. And often they will want to, like you say, talk more because of that.
mm,
Also, I was going to say too, the eye contact. We're very good at being busy sometimes and we talk without facing. And I think that eye contact and face on is really important too. So they're actually seeing how the face is working with the language
mm.
as
Yes,
well.
because they're used to picking up. Remember, they've been learning from babyhood. They've been looking at people's faces and picking up cues. So they're actually probably more honed to body language than we are, especially facial expression
Absolutely.
and the awareness of attention that we give them. Um, and I have seen in certain circumstances, I have seen a toddler take a mother's face and turn it towards them
Oh,
just
yes,
to say,
yes,
look at me,
absolutely.
um, in
Yes.
a beautiful way, in a beautiful
Yeah.
moment. But it is so true that when we give full attention, it makes such a difference. And it's the same for adults when we're talking to people. If we're looking at something, if something else catches our eye and we look at it, the participant in the discussion does the same thing. And it's
So
no
true.
different for
Yes.
children, really.
Yeah.
We can't do it all the time as parents because there's things to be done, but we
Sure.
need to remember sometimes to slow down and take a moment. I think you're quite right, Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was going to talk then a little bit about books too and how important they are too with
Mm,
this language and how we can support them. I know at BestStart there's lots of rich experiences that go on with books there.
mm.
How early do we start with that?
I think as early as a curiosity. So I think older babies and certainly by toddlers, picture books are great to have around and to follow the child, what they're looking at or what they point to and making
Yes,
conversation around that. So again, it's more of an interaction rather than reading a book to a toddler. I mean, anyone that's tried to read a book to a toddler knows that like 90% of the time, they're not going to go that way anyway, but they're learning about turning pages, they're learning about images, you're extending the language. I also think it's great to have photos. And these days, now
lovely.
that you can print at home, or maybe you can look on an iPad or um, in different formats, photos of themselves and photos of what their family have been doing really sparks children's
Very
minds
powerful.
and thinking
Yeah,
and conversations, even 1 word, 2 words, 3 word conversations. But
yeah.
it goes into them talking about the past and the present, and maybe some conversation to start to learn about the future as well as they get a bit older.
Absolutely. And by being involved with different people and hearing different
Mhm.
types of language and different intonation and everything else, they learn a lot too, don't they? And even that time when it's their turn to speak, all of these things, they're little sponges, aren't they? We don't realize
Yeah,
how much
yeah.
they are actually picking up.
And yet they suddenly know how to do all of these conventions, for want of a
Yes,
better word, how
absolutely.
and when to enter a conversation, and what's appropriate when, is all learnt from the amazing ability toddlers have to observe us. We don't realise just how much they're observing us
They
until
are.
you see
Absolutely.
yourself. And I'm sure parents that are
Yes,
listening know that moment when they notice a mannerism or a saying repeated to them and
yes,
go, "Oh, that's me," you
it
know.
is.
Um,
I've seen that happen with animals when they turn to talk to animals, and often you see that, the way that someone might engage with the child, like, no, don't, or something like that, and they say it to them, and you think, just a minute, right, we may need to change our modelling a little bit.
yes, yes, it's good for us. It's good for us to see what it is and how we can change too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, one of the other things was singing, a really good way of
Oh,
with language as well.
it is a lovely way with language. Singing and nursery rhymes, or
Yeah.
rhymes related to the culture that the family is more familiar with. That's why I often say find the rhymes and songs that you enjoyed as a child, because they're part of your history, they're part of you. So there's that enjoyment back and forwards of teaching something you loved to your child. There's a lot of lovely books with rhymes and finger plays. In all sorts of different cultures that allow that interactive participation as well. So there's sort of like playing with fingers and counting, or going
Yes.
up and down and up and down. Make up your own. They just become your little um, special thing within your family if you start to put
Absolutely.
words to actions that children giggle to and enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the more fun it is, it builds that trust and relationship as well as language at the same time.
Oh, so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the amazing times that I used to really enjoy with my children was bath time, which
Oh,
often was a time where it sparked all those fun, songs and, like playing with things in the bath, but the language that comes out of it, it's a
mm.
lovely time to engage, isn't it?
It is a lovely time to engage, and it's soothing for the child. So they're
Yes.
relaxing, and I find the whole experience of bathing actually slows me down as well. It slows the adult
Yeah.
down, and so it can end up with some lovely moments, especially if you're attuned with your child at that point, and you're watching the body language, listening to the words, and you're just extending on that. It's just lovely.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And the other thing is, we were talking about books and lovely resources that you can get, and we're very lucky with our libraries. We don't have to be buying the books, but libraries are fantastic. And don't think I've met a child who doesn't enjoy going and choosing their own books. It's a lovely thing to be able to do, and taking a little bag there. Lots
Oh,
of
yeah, I think
interactions
libraries
happening.
are fantastic because children can change and work through books quite quickly. But
Yes.
I can remember my son, who's now well into his 30s, having a favourite book, The Jelly Bean Queen, and
Oh,
we got the book out once, and then we went and we got it renewed, and then we got it renewed, and then months later he wanted it again, and it was out, and I think we had to go. I live in Auckland, and
yes.
we looked through several libraries and found it several suburbs over, and so we borrowed it again. But
Oh,
it's
lovely.
fantastic to have a
Yeah.
library to be able to do that. I
They're
don't know,
amazing
Marie. I
resources.
was thinking the other day too, when it comes to books and other resources that parents might want to have for their children, that the toy libraries used to be quite active, and I'm unsure
Absolutely.
about them in terms of COVID now, but they were always
Ah,
a good source,
yes,
especially for jigsaw puzzles and other small toys, so that you could
absolutely.
have more variety over time at
Yes.
home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Totally, and I'm also unaware of where that lies at the moment, but they certainly are.
Mm.
If people have an opportunity, a lovely way too to try something out and see if it's something they might enjoy. You know, if you're thinking for birthdays and Christmas, sometimes you see an item and you think, oh, they'd love it. In fact, they show very little interest once you take it out of the toy library. So it's a great way of, paying a very small amount to join up. Um, and also, again, there's lots of things there that happen when you're in the library, watching their reactions, how they choose things. I don't know, Barbara, schemas, is that something that you have done a lot of work around in regards to? The schemas that children work through, the um, things they come back to all the time.
Yes, yes, a little bit of work around schemas, and it's
Yeah.
particularly noticeable with the toddler age group. And schemas are kind of like actions that are repeated, but are more than that for the child. They're about their learning. So the schemas might be around posting is quite a common one, and that one
Yes.
can be annoying for parents because they're posting. You can get posting boxes with shapes that children can learn to put in, and start with really simple shapes so that it's a positive experience and grow from there. But then that children that like posting post into the couch and
Oh, yes.
into
Or
the
the
letter.
VCR machine, it used to be, didn't
Ah,
it? In the
yes,
90s and 2000s.
yeah, yep, yep. So, yeah, but there are other schemas about motions and actions that toddlers really like to do over and over again.
Yes.
Like the linear one, where often a child for a period of time, if they've got toy cars, will want to just put them in a row, and
That's
then
right,
they put
lining up,
something
yes.
else in a row. If they don't
Yeah,
put them in a row, that's fine too. But
yeah,
if that's what they're into, you want to find enough resources that they can keep having a go at that and learning about putting things in row. It's the schemas are often linked in some way to learning urges, we call them, and I
yes,
think it's kind of that natural thing in psychology where children almost naturally know what they need to learn next, so they want to practice, 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 and so that's the thing that they get involved in for a period of time. And when you notice those repetitive things, then that's the kind of thing you want to be able to get resources for your child. And it
absolutely,
can be
yeah,
the toys, or it can be just materials from around the house or in the outdoors, like 6 or 7 pine cones, or milk, the different coloured milk bottle tops, or a range of pegs, and then they would start making those in a line or posting them. I
yes,
used to get
absolutely.
um, the paper towel, the middle of the paper towel
Oh, yes, the
roll,
roll, yes.
and sellotape it to the leg of the table, and then they just
Ah,
drop
fantastic.
eggs
Yes,
or drop whatever
yes,
through that into a basket at the bottom, and then they could take the
fantastic.
basket and do it again. And when they're really in that zone, they just want to do that over and over again and really enjoy
Absolutely.
it for a period of 10, 15 minutes. Yeah.
And that's one of the wonderful things, though, isn't it, about the environmental resources that you will find in your house that actually you don't have to pay any money for. I mean, pegs is a great example. We have all those things in our pantries, the plasticware that we have that they love opening and closing, the pots and pans, the plastic cups for stacking. There are so many things we actually have that children will engage with very readily and will find lots of fun in and actually use their imaginations to play games with them. And, sometimes the most expensive of toys become completely redundant because you'll find there'll be something in your kitchen or bathroom that they actually love and play with in the bath or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
So
think I know that certainly early childhood teachers have started to do this, but looking at the $2 shop for
yes.
things that are safe, but homely, because it really links into that pretend play that
That's right.
starts to happen around this age. And that pretend play is really important because it's how they repeat what they've seen to make sense of it. And so
Indeed.
they pretend to cook dinner, and they pretend to feed a baby, and they pretend to mow the lawn, or whatever it is that they've taken a fancy to and notice that the family does. We call that everyday knowledge. And it's
Right.
everyday knowledge is really, really important. It's as important as academic knowledge to
Yes.
know why you do things, that you need. We used to say money to go to the shops, but now you need your card to go to the shop.
Indeed. Yeah.
You know, and you see children in centres will use a block to be a telephone, you know.
Yes.
So you're quite right. It can be anything. And when the resources are more simple, you find that what children and toddlers tend to do is use them to pretend there's something else. And
Yes.
then they can be many things. Rather than buying a toy telephone, it becomes, the block becomes a telephone. There's always
Absolutely.
something that they can use. Um, you know, we sometimes label that junk play because it's
Right.
bits and pieces,
Bits and
but
pieces. Yes.
it's very rich in terms of even allowing children to develop thinking, because they have to think about how they're going to use the pieces and what they're going to use them for and how they're going to interact with each other. Whereas if you buy the made up phone and the made up pieces of equipment, they tend to only be used for that.
In that one way.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. And
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
the theory goes that having lots of different pieces of things that children can use to be a whole lot of different things
Yeah.
is actually more beneficial for their thinking process.
Absolutely. It makes
Problem
sense, doesn't it?
solving. Yeah, it
Yes.
does. It
Yeah.
does.
And
Yeah.
you will often find in their bedrooms or on the corner or in a basket somewhere around the house a whole lot of things that they have collected for that
Yeah.
very reason, and they will have an idea of what those things are. They've got an idea of how they want to
Mm.
use them as well.
Mm.
Barbara, I was going to ask you about at this stage with toddlers about how they play in regards to other children. So we've
Mm.
come from the infant stage where it's very independent and somebody's engaging with them. What are we looking at now with toddlers?
Um, we're really looking at them starting to interact and play beside other children.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Occasionally you get some further interaction, but it's usually around body language because there's not a lot of language yet. But often it's playing beside, and the company is important. So you
Sure.
think they're playing like totally separately, but they're very aware of each other, and it's the beginning of being able to um, maneuver and be with other people and work and interact with them.
Yeah. Those
Sometimes you
shared
find them,
ideas are
yeah,
interesting,
yeah,
aren't they?
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And funny games, like if somebody does something and makes a block fall and it's funny and the other one laughs, then it will be repeated because they know that it's had a positive reaction on their peer, on
Yeah.
the other child. So there are beginnings of really nice interactions
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
related to that, and also occasionally frustrations, and they are
Yes. I was
just
going to
as
say.
important.
Yes.
Learning how to cope with frustration and difference is something that we have to manage all of our lives. And so
Absolutely.
it's okay that it starts in toddlerhood.
Yeah.
And there's some explanation and some skills suggested to a child to support them through that.
And that's
Yeah.
really important, I think, for parents to understand as well that it is very normal. And
Mm,
I think sometimes when they're playing with other children, we react ourselves. We might be embarrassed by their behavior. We might sort of overcompensate or take them away from the situation. When there is some sort of interaction where, there might be a bit of argy-bargy over a toy, or there might be, tears, what's best for the adult to do in that situation?
I think it's best that they talk through what's happening and
Yeah.
acknowledge the emotions. I can see
Yes.
that you're sad that he's got that toy and you really wanted it. Let's wait for him to finish. So there's no, that's a bad reaction. It's a bit like the language learning. The emotional learning is about building confidence.
Absolutely.
Easier said than done, though,
Yes, of
because
course.
you're, as
Yeah.
a parent,
Yeah.
I've had experience of the parenthood and the teacher. Much
Yes.
harder when you're the parent and you're emotionally involved, to keep you cool. But the best thing for the child is to acknowledge the emotions, and then um, remembering that they can't just switch their emotion off.
Right.
So we've
Absolutely.
got to give some lag time to how
Yeah.
that frustration has to be shown for a period of time,
Yeah.
and then suggesting what they could do while they wait or while something else happens. So there's a bit of distraction maybe, but then there's a coming back.
Yeah.
Um, when someone, oh, look, they finished now. And with toddlers, it's usually only a few minutes anyway. Though a few minutes is
Absolutely.
a long time for a toddler.
It
But,
is
like,
indeed.
oh,
It
look,
is
they
indeed.
finished now. Now you
Yeah.
could have a turn. Or
Yeah.
whatever, because it's very rarely as simple as that. It's sometimes, if it gets to some hitting or something, you need to actually maybe stop the play and then redirect and then come back to it. The
Yeah.
other thing that's often said with your older toddlers is the time to talk about the situation is not when they're emotional. And
Right.
if
Yes.
you make that connection with
Yes.
us, if I've just got really annoyed about something and someone says, well, now I think, Barbara, you need to calm down and you need to, well, that's the last thing I'm going to do. So
Very
it's
true.
the same for a toddler. So you might say you need a few minutes, or later in the day, you could say, hey, remember when, and have a little bit of coaching around what could have happened instead. It
Lovely.
won't change it overnight, though. It takes
No,
time.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I think it's really important for people to remember it's very normal, and,
Mm,
sometimes, one of the things I used to find quite helpful when I was going to playgroup and I knew that some of these situations might arise, I often had a little chat before we went in. So, just starting that idea of, we're going to share some of the toys. If you have a problem, I'm going to be here, And so we kind of talked it through. Didn't say it didn't mean the situations didn't happen, but there was all of this language around it. And I think the thing is, knowing that somebody is there often helps as well.
mm,
That they can turn to you, but you're also going to know that we can't hit other people, but
no.
this is how we might manage it. So that language is important, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think for the adult, it's also important to remember that all behavior is communication.
Yes,
It's
indeed.
not because they want to annoy us.
Yes. Oh, no,
It's a
absolutely.
form of communication, a form of frustration, a
Yeah.
form of anger, a form of sadness. So, what is the communication they're trying to make, and how can I connect with that communication? And we
Yes.
won't get it right even as parents 100% of the time.
Absolutely, and
But I
very to
found
do
that
with
calmed me down
yeah,
because it's just in you as a parent to want to respond and protect your child.
absolutely. And that's a
Um,
good thing too. That's
yeah,
that's
it
not a
is.
bad
It
thing, is
is.
it? Yeah.
No, not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
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 I think the other thing is that modeling again. So we model language, but we also model
Mm,
behaviors, don't we? So
mm,
we want to be setting a good example in the way that we interact with other people, and they will notice how we interact and what we say and what we do. And I think that's really important too, just to be aware that little eyes are on you all the time.
yes.
So if we
That's how
want
they
them
learn.
to,
That's how they learn.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yes.
Barbara, what's happening in the brain for a little toddler? Explosions? What's happening in that
Oh,
space?
a lot is happening in the brain. Um, I think the curiosity is growing,
Yes.
the wanting to understand the language, the wanting to interact a little bit more with people. Um, so I think the really important thing is around them making sense of their world, so that dramatic pretend play is so important. It's all about beginnings of creativity too. So
Yeah.
so the creativity is around what can I create, what thinking can I do, and what can I have control of in terms of that. So it's the beginning of looking at cause and effect, and if I do this, what will the reaction to that be?
Yes.
So there's a lot of thinking. Some say that toddlers are like young scientists. They're actually exploring their world in so many ways. They learn about texture, they learn about what things can do, how they can move things, how they can push and pull. Um, it's really laying the foundation. And I find that the more experiences that you can give a child, like going to the park, a walk in the bush, going to the beach, visiting friends, going to a play group, um, all of those experiences build knowledge for the child. So it's them being involved in situations, having a go at things that their older siblings or other children they see doing. They'll want to do that, of course.
Yes.
So it's a real time of growth for the brain.
Yeah.
So they're learning the language, they're also learning interactions, and they're learning how they can manipulate the things in their world. It's very, very big.
Yeah, absolutely. You when you were saying before about the brain and the science, I heard a lovely thing the other day. It was play is the highest form of research, and I thought, isn't that lovely? Because in fact, it is, and it's something that we probably lose a little bit as we get older. And in fact, what they are discovering and learning is so amazing in those years, isn't it?
And do you know
Yeah,
who said that quote? It was
I don't.
Einstein himself.
Ah, there
It
you
was
go.
Einstein himself who said that
The
quote.
man who knew what he was talking about.
Yes, and he also
Yeah,
said that uh, you can learn more from watching someone play than you can from a standard test.
isn't that interesting?
Because you can see how they problem solve, how they work
Yes.
through things,
Yeah.
etc. And so it is a really important time for young children to be having a go at lots of things and thinking and trial and error.
Yeah.
All of, I think the play is around having a go. I think we forget, or that we get more uptight about being wrong as we get older,
That's
rather
true. We put
than
more
being
boundaries
able
in, don't
to,
we?
yeah,
Yes.
to practice. Whereas toddlers have not learnt that yet. So they're more
Yeah.
curious to just have a try, I think, than older
Absolutely.
children and adults often are.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they don't probably see the flaws so much or the dangers. And that
No.
was one of the things I was going to bring up too. That safety obviously is a very important
Mm.
element of play with toddlers. Uh, when we talk about some of the dangers, we're still probably seeing things put in mouths. Would that be correct?
Oh, well, some and not all.
Yeah.
Some and not all. Some children carry that on for some time, and it's almost a way of telling what a material is made of.
Sure.
Like it's almost, um, and it's and so I think you do have to be careful of size for choking,
Yes.
particularly. I think,
Absolutely. Yep. So
and
still looking at
sharpness
the
also
table
may not.
tennis ball.
Yeah, I
Yep.
would. I
Yep.
would. Those table tennis balls can be very dangerous. I think
Yeah.
I'd only use them under supervision,
Yeah.
under four, really,
Yes. Yep.
because if you bite and deflate it, it can end up at the beginning of your throat
Yep.
and be stuck there. And if a parent's not seen that happen, um, it can be really disastrous. So I tend to steer away from ping pong balls and
Yep.
things. Something big enough that children wouldn't want to put in their mouths.
Absolutely.
Pegs are a
Yeah.
bit different, but I prefer using, and I think they feel nice, is those wooden pegs. And I saw that you can buy
Oh,
those in
yes.
the craft
You can.
craft
Yeah.
section of
Absolutely.
Kmart and places like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Uh, yeah,
Wood's
so
actually a lovely material, isn't it, for
wood
toys
is a
too?
lovely
Yeah.
material. I
Yeah.
think it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And if
Absolutely.
you're worried because of COVID, things like pegs can be washed. in a sink or in a dishwasher quite easily
Yes.
as well.
Yeah,
It's just
and
being
and
really,
that's a good thing to talk about at the moment, isn't it?
yeah.
Shared toys,
Mm,
just being a little bit careful, making sure things are cleaned.
mm,
Some things can go in the dishwasher, others a little bit of a hand wash,
yeah,
and air dry. But just always good to be aware of. But I think in current conditions, really important too.
yeah.
Barbara, one of the things I've got a couple of questions that we've got for some parents, but I wanted to ask you too. What would be your key things for parents in regards to playing with their children? We get this whole guilt trip the whole time. We're not spending enough time with them. We want to be realistic about this. What are some of the things that we can say to parents about that?
I think the key thing is look at, like with younger children, look at the routines.
Yes.
Like, um, Mary, you talked before about bath time, about
Yeah.
meal time, about choosing 5 or 10 minutes a day when you're absolutely going to be focused. So, looking for the times and the routines that you can use to do some good one to one,
Yeah.
especially if there's more than one child in the family,
Indeed.
that
Yes.
becomes even
Yeah.
more tricky. So, I think it is just looking for the time and intentionally thinking, but not feeling guilty when you can't because there's other things to do. But
Yeah.
what's wonderful about the moments you take is that I find it slows me down as well. When I'm working in a centre with children,
Yeah.
it slows me down. And so it's the
Absolutely.
moment I can take that's actually beneficial for both of us. So
Indeed.
that
Yeah.
would be what I'd say
It
to
can be
parents.
really pleasurable too, can't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
something like being at the
Yeah,
Play-Doh table and just Play-Doh and the talking and the making, that can actually be lovely for adults as well. Yeah.
absolutely. And so
Yeah.
can the painting and the drawing.
Yeah.
And it can just be at home if parents are really worried about writing on the walls and paint everywhere, and it will happen with a toddler for sure.
For
Um,
sure.
I say use chalk because you
Yes.
can
Yeah.
wipe it off really easily, washes off clothes really easy. If you want something that's easy, where toddlers start to make marks, um, and think of it that way, because making a mark relates to art as much as it does to writing, and
True.
both
Yeah.
need to start with actually, how do I make a mark that looks like something to
Yeah.
me? Yeah,
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
very powerful for them, isn't it?
It's good.
Okay. Now I've just got a couple of questions, if that's okay. So, when and how should we respond so as not to interrupt self-directed play?
Good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
I think as much as possible, you want to leave self directed play, but there are family routines or routines
Yes.
in a centre that still need to happen. You still need to make sure a child is toileted. You still have to make sure a child is eating and drinking regularly. So,
Yeah.
those health reasons might be good reasons to interrupt play. Um, Sleep time, because um, if a toddler doesn't want to sleep, they'll continue their play on purpose.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other thing with interrupting play is that you give a warning,
Sure. Yes.
because what we tend to do to children is what we don't do with adults. And I use that as a measuring stick often, because I think, would it annoy me as an adult, and how is my self control to cope
Yeah.
with that? And if I was in the middle of thinking and doing something on my computer, an email to a friend,
Yeah.
or doing something else, and someone said, right, you've got to come, that's really hard, and how much
Oh,
harder it
absolutely.
is for a toddler. So I think you keep the play going as long as you can, as long as it's safe, as long as the child isn't in need of water, sleep, or food, or
Yes.
toilet.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's really good to give a warning and then stick to it.
So
Say,
maybe an egg timer or
yeah,
something. Is that a good
yeah,
thing to use?
that's a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
thing to use. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Those transitions can be hard for them, can't they?
And
Moving
for
from one
toddlers in
activity to
particular,
another.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So
And I
lots of
think it's
warnings are
partly
good.
again because they can't tell you exactly how they feel, so they're going to act
Yeah.
how they feel, and then they don't realize
Absolutely.
how that emotion can grow quite quickly because they're learning how to cope with
Yes.
those.
It gets
Yeah,
quite big for them too,
yeah,
doesn't it? It's hard to
it
come down
does.
from. Absolutely. Here's one from a parent. What is a quick game to play when we have limited time?
Oh, there's quite a few. Um, with your younger toddler, I still
Yeah.
peekaboo.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I think simple finger games that you can make up yourself.
Yeah.
There's Peter and Paul, if you know that, the two,
Oh,
I call them the
absolutely.
parrots.
The
Go
Dicky
away,
Birds.
Peter, go away,
Yes.
Paul, come
Yeah.
back, Peter, come back, Paul.
Yeah.
So, um, really, any of those little rhymes
Yeah.
are good are
Books are
good to
good too,
use.
aren't
Where would
they?
you go to find them? I'd Google
Yes.
and find the one or two that I really liked,
Yeah.
because I think if you like them, you can do them better,
Yes,
and
of
then your
course.
child enjoys them better. So
Absolutely.
that for an idea of what would suit you, I would tend to go there. Another favourite from a European perspective would be Round and Round the Garden Went the Teddy Bear.
Oh,
One
yes,
step,
that's right.
two step, tickly under
Tickle.
there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that could be another one, or you
Yes.
just change the words and make it whatever
Yeah.
you want
And as you
related to
say,
something.
every culture will have a different
Mm,
type of rhyme or a different story that
mm,
they tell. And every family too will have their own tradition like that as well, won't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're unsure, I would Google as a start, Google
Yes.
either nursery rhymes, finger plays, words like
Yeah.
that, and see what you came up with.
Brilliant.
There'll be
Well, that actually
lots on the
brings
internet.
brings me on to that last bit actually that I wanted to touch on today, and that was talking about the 16 areas of play that BestStart have, because they are
Yes.
just an amazing resource. Can you quickly explain what they are? We'll be putting the link up later on for everybody.
Mm. There are more than 16 areas of play.
Yeah,
But we chose 16 because we thought that was a workable number. So what we've done is we've set up on our BestStart main page. You can access the BestStart 16 areas of play. And the areas of play, with each one, there's an explanation of what that play area is like and what it actually provides for your child. And then behind that is resources for different age groups that you can go in and have a look at and choose what you like from that. And we're trying to update those regularly. It is a wonderful resource. We find that the
lovely
teachers
resource.
use it.
Yes.
They sometimes share it with the parents, and we have parents going in and having a look. And we've made that open access so people can come in and have a look.
Yeah,
So,
I would really recommend it. I think it's a
yeah,
lovely resource, and it really just gives you a few ideas too, doesn't it?
mm,
Of
mm.
the reason they're doing that, but also some lovely activities to do with your children.
Mm, mm. So,
Brilliant.
like
You,
for instance, Marie, if you went onto the Play-Doh, there's several recipes for Play-Doh. So you don't need to
yes,
buy Play-Doh. You can
absolutely.
buy it if you want to, but
Yeah,
you can actually make it yourself and keep it.
yeah.
I found Play-Doh's amazing from 2 right through to about 8.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
I had when children came round, school-aged children with my children,
Yeah,
they'd say, "Oh, can you make us that Play-Doh?" And
yeah,
so we just continue making it. Um, that's the beauty of having an early childhood background. But yeah, those
absolutely.
16
Yeah,
areas of play, there's
yeah.
something for every age group in there. It's
Fantastic.
developing really nicely, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for everyone in here tonight, and for when you come back to have a look at it, we will pop those into the link, and you'll be able to go and see those, and maybe explore a different one every week if you wanted to.
Mm.
So I think we're going to leave it there. A huge thank you, Barbara, for joining us again tonight with all of your expertise, because it is fantastic to hear from somebody like yourself who's been in this area for a long time, both as mum and educator, and get those ideas and just find out a little bit about what they're doing in that space. So we appreciate that very much. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Kia ora.
Brilliant. Take care, everybody.